already on environmental issues, but can you expand a bit on, how does our response to environmental problems play out under the neoliberal agenda, and what should we be doing?
Under the neoliberal agenda, what you see is government policy being directed in ways that support the status quo. That is, they support the organisations, the corporations that currently have power in that system. This is why you have such a huge backlash from mining companies, for example, when the question about taxing their super profits comes to the fore. The way that the system works for them. It generates enormous profits for a very small number of people. If you were to look at addressing climate change from a different values base, that is from a values base of the public interest in terms of a decent society and a healthy world, then you'd have to take into account the long-term effects of climate change and how climate change interacts with social justice, that it is a justice issue, and that it is an environmental issue in and of itself. One of the things we see happening as the neoliberal economic agenda plays out in government decision-making, and that interacts with our political system, is that everything is done on the short term, on a short-term basis. So decisions are made, based on the next 3 years, the next 5 years. I think climate change challenges that. The effects of climate change challenge that to an enormous degree, because what we have to get our heads around is what's going to happen not in the next 3 years or the next 6 years in terms of electoral cycles, but in terms of the next 10 years, 20 years, 3 or 4 generations down the track. And until we understand that the public interest is well served by looking ahead at the situation that our children will face and our grandchildren and generations to come after us, then we're going to continue to be making short-term policy decisions based on the desires of those places in the system that currently benefit from it.
Now, are there signs of hope for you that those with influence in the system may have other values? For instance, we've just seen the CEOs of some of the biggest multinational companies, Google, Apple and Microsoft, appear before a Senate committee being questioned about moving profits offshore and so avoiding their fair share of tax. But are there any signs of hope for you?
I think the fact that this inquiry is being held in Australia and that companies like Google and Microsoft and Apple are being called to answer questions is a sign of hope. And I think that is the result of a lot of growing grassroots concern from among people about what is happening. When our government talks about budget deficits and reducing tax revenue, I think people are quite confronted, or at the very least surprised, when they hear that there are these major international corporations who are using these loopholes to avoid paying tax in the appropriate jurisdictions. Another sign of hope is that this issue is gaining traction around the world, and we've seen the G20 begin to address that. So I think with growing concern from amongst the population, both here and internationally, and a growing sense of political will, which I'm beginning to see the seeds of, I'm hopeful that at least on this matter, we're going to start to see some changes being made, particularly here in Australia.
And just finally, what do you say to people who might say to you, the church should stay out of politics and just stick to spiritual issues?
Well, many a politician has told the church that on a number of occasions. I think Alexander Downer was well known amongst uniting Anglican and Catholic circles for telling us to get back into our boxes and look after our flocks on a Sunday and not worry too much about anything else. But there's a big difference between being partisan and engaging in party political processes and being political. And I firmly believe that the Christian gospel calls us to be engaged with the way that we organise ourselves as a society, the way that we live together as human beings, and in relationship with the environment. And that's political, because what is politics other than how we organise our lives together? So there is this very deep and central call on us as Christians to speak out against injustice, to stand with and walk with those who are marginalised and oppressed in our society, and to work for peace. Now, all of those things are highly political. To stand up and to claim that a system is unjust and that it perpetuates inequity is to make a political stance, to demonstrate against wars where we know that so many civilians are being killed and where peaceful means to end conflict haven't been given a fair chance. That's a political act. When we stand with those who are oppressed in our society, marginalised, when we stand with people who are homeless, refugees and asylum seekers, when we uphold their voices and help to bring their concerns into the public space, then that too is a political act. And I believe that Jesus has called us to be there, to engage in those actions, and therefore it is a requirement, I believe, of our faith that we are political.